Dear Talking About Platforms listeners, this episode is part of our special AI-generated series, exploring the key ideas and influential works that have shaped platform studies. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Talking About Platforms podcast. We're continuing our special series on core platform papers. And today we're diving deep into a paper that attempts to define the very foundation of what we study ecosystems.
That's right. We're looking at Towards a Theory of Ecosystems by Jacobides, Cennamo, and Gawer from 2018.
Okay.
It's a real touchstone in the field, published in the Strategic Management Journal, and it tries to bring some much-needed clarity to this concept that, let's be honest, gets thrown around a lot.
It really does. In fact,
Yeah.
the paper itself starts by highlighting that in Alibaba's IPO prospectus from around the same time, the word ecosystem appears over 160 times.
Right.
Clearly, everyone was talking about ecosystems,
Yeah.
but were they all talking about the same thing?
That's the crux of the issue, and this paper digs right into it. It identifies three main perspectives on ecosystems that were floating around at the time. You've got the business ecosystem view, which is very firm-centric, focused on a company and its immediate environment. Then there's the innovation ecosystem, which is centered around a specific innovation and the network of actors involved in its development.
And of course, we can't forget the platform ecosystem perspective, which has become increasingly important with the rise of companies like Google and Apple. These ecosystems revolve around a central platform that enables interactions between a whole host of other actors.
Now, while these perspectives are distinct, the paper argues that they all share a common foundation: modularity.
Okay, let's unpack this idea of modularity. It sounds pretty technical.
Well, think of it like building with Legos. Each brick is a self-contained unit with clear interfaces, and you can connect them in countless ways to create complex structures. In a business ecosystem, modularity means that different companies can specialize in specific parts of a process or product. They can develop their own Lego bricks that fit together with others to create something bigger.
So instead of one company trying to do everything in-house, you have a network of specialized players contributing their unique expertise.
Exactly. And because these Lego bricks have well-defined interfaces, there's less need for top-down control. It allows for a more decentralized, self-organizing structure, which is a hallmark of many successful ecosystems.
That makes sense. But is modularity alone enough to create a thriving ecosystem? It seems like it would take more than just having the right building blocks.
You're absolutely right. The paper argues that modularity sets the stage, but the real magic happens when you add complementarities into the mix.
Complementarities. So we're talking about situations where different parts of the system enhance each other's value.
Precisely. Think about a smartphone. A great camera on its own is nice, but it becomes even more valuable when you have social media apps that allow you to share those photos instantly. And those social media apps in turn become more appealing because people have high-quality cameras in their pockets. That's complementarity in action.
So the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts.
Exactly. The paper goes deeper and distinguishes between two key types of complementarities: unique and supermodular.
All right, break those down for us. What's the difference?
A unique complementarity is like a lock and key. One part depends on the other to even function. Think of a smartphone app that's specifically designed for a particular operating system. It's useless without that OS.
Right.
That's a unique complementarity.
Okay, I see. And supermodular complementarities.
Think of a social media platform.
Okay.
The more users join, the more valuable the platform becomes for everyone involved. More users mean more potential connections, more content to consume, and more data for the platform to leverage. That's supermodularity. The value of each part increases as more players join the party.
So unique complementarities are about essential dependencies, while supermodular complementarities are about the network effects that drive growth and value creation.
That's a great way to put it. Now, these concepts of modularity and complementarities help us understand why ecosystems are different from traditional supply chains, even though both involve multiple companies working together.
That's an interesting distinction. I would have thought they were fairly similar. So what sets ecosystems apart?
In a supply chain, you typically have a linear flow of goods and services, with one company often having significant control over the process. But in an ecosystem, participants retain a significant degree of autonomy. It's less about a chain of command and more about a web of interdependent, but ultimately independent actors.
So it's a much more fluid and dynamic structure.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important concept from the paper: fungibility.
Fungibility. Now, there's a word I haven't heard in a while. Refresh my memory. What does that mean in this context?
It refers to how easily investments made for one ecosystem can be repurposed for another. Imagine a software developer who has built their entire business around creating apps for a specific platform. How easy would it be for them to switch to a different platform? That's what fungibility is all about.
So if their skills and technology are highly specialized to one platform, their investments would be less fungible, right?
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is that the paper suggests that lower fungibility, meaning it's harder to switch between ecosystems, can actually strengthen an ecosystem.
Now that's counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm.
I would have thought that making it easier to move between ecosystems would make them stronger. Why would lower fungibility be a good thing?
Think about it from the perspective of a company that's heavily invested in a particular ecosystem. If it's difficult for them to switch, they're more likely to be committed to that ecosystem's success. They're in it for the long haul, and that can foster a stronger sense of collaboration and interdependence.
So it's like a double-edged sword. High fungibility might lead to more fluidity and potential for growth, but low fungibility can foster deeper commitment and a stronger sense of community.
That's a great way to summarize it. And this naturally leads us to the question of ecosystem governance. Who sets the rules of the game, and how does that impact the dynamics within the ecosystem?
That's a crucial question. And it seems like there's a whole spectrum of possibilities. You have companies like Apple, which exert a lot of control over their app store, setting strict guidelines and taking a significant cut of the revenue. But then you also have more open source communities where governance is much more distributed and decentralized.
You've hit the nail on the head. The paper highlights this range of governance models, from strong hub firms like Apple to more collaborative and community-driven approaches. And understanding these different models is crucial for understanding how value is created, captured, and distributed within ecosystems. One of the things this paper does so well is highlight just how much we still don't know about ecosystems.
It definitely feels like we're just beginning to understand the complexities of these dynamic systems.
One area that the paper touches on, but that I think deserves more attention, is the idea of accidental ecosystems.
Accidental ecosystems. That sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
Well, not all ecosystems are deliberately designed. Some emerge organically, often in unexpected ways, even against the wishes of the key players. Think about the early days of the iPhone. Apple initially wanted to maintain tight control over the device, limiting what developers could do.
So Steve Jobs didn't actually envision the App Store as we know it today.
Not exactly. It evolved from this grassroots movement of independent developers who saw the potential of the iPhone as a platform and started creating apps, even though Apple initially resisted the idea.
That's wild. It's like nature finding a way, even in the digital world. Those independent developers were like those invasive plant species that take root where you least expect them and end up transforming the landscape.
I love that analogy. And those accidental ecosystems can be just as powerful, if not more so, than the ones that are meticulously planned. They often tap into latent needs and opportunities that the established players might have overlooked.
I'm starting to see why this is such a rich area for research. We need to understand how these accidental ecosystems emerge, what factors drive their growth, and how companies can adapt to them even when they disrupt existing business models.
Absolutely. This ties into a broader question that the paper raises. Why do some collaborations take the form of ecosystems while others opt for more traditional models like supply chains or alliances?
That's a great question. I mean, ecosystems seem to offer a lot of flexibility, right? You're not locked into rigid contracts or hierarchical structures. It's more about a loose network of independent actors who can adapt and evolve together.
That's true, but it's not just about flexibility. It also depends on the nature of the complementarities involved. Remember our discussion about unique versus super modular complementarities?
Of course. So if a company needs a very specific component or service that isn't readily available in the open market, forming an ecosystem might be a way to create that specialized supply. It's like building a custom Lego set to meet a very particular need.
Exactly. And if there are strong supermodular complementarities, meaning everyone benefits as the ecosystem grows, that can also incentivize companies to choose this model. The more the merrier, as they say.
It's all about finding the structure that best fits the nature of the interdependence, the types of complementarities, and the strategic goals of the players involved.
And this leads us to another fascinating question that the paper hints at. What are the factors that make some ecosystems more collaborative than others?
That's a good one. Intuitively, I would think that ecosystems with strong supermodular complementarities would be more collaborative because everyone has a vested interest in the collective success. If the pie gets bigger for everyone, you're more likely to cooperate, right?
You're definitely on the right track. But there's another factor to consider, and that's fungibility.
Fungibility again. Remind me how that fits into the collaboration equation.
Remember, fungibility refers to how easily investments can be transferred between ecosystems. The paper suggests that the less fungible the investments, the more committed companies are to a particular ecosystem, and therefore the more motivated they are to collaborate to make it work.
So if I built my entire business around a specific platform, and it would be incredibly costly and disruptive for me to switch, I'm going to be much more invested in the success of that platform and more likely to collaborate with others to make it thrive. It's like being stuck on a lifeboat. You're all in it together.
That's a great analogy. Low fungibility can create a sense of shared destiny, which can foster collaboration. But of course, there's a flip side to this coin.
I was just thinking that if low fungibility makes it harder to leave an ecosystem, wouldn't that also make it harder to attract new participants in the first place? It's like that lifeboat analogy. It might be good for those already on board, but it's going to be harder to convince others to jump in.
That's a very astute observation. It highlights a fundamental tension in ecosystem design, the need to create enough stickiness to foster commitment while also being attractive to new members.
It's a delicate balancing act, for sure.
And this is where the role of the hub firm becomes especially important.
Because they often set the rules of the game right.
Exactly. Hub firms can influence the level of openness and fungibility in their ecosystems. They can design the system in a way that encourages collaboration, or they can create a more competitive environment. They can make it easy to join, or they can erect barriers to entry.
And this all ties back to the question of value creation and capture, right? Different governance models and levels of fungibility are going to lead to different distributions of the spoils.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another crucial area that this paper opens up for research, the competitive dynamics between ecosystems.
This is something we see play out all the time in the tech world, right? Apple and Google, for example, are constantly vying for dominance in the smartphone ecosystem.
Exactly. And those battles can be fierce. The paper talks about how the emergence of a strong competitor can force companies to rethink their strategies and adapt their rules of engagement. They might become more open to attract new members or more closed to protect their core assets.
It's like an evolutionary arms race. Each ecosystem is constantly evolving to try to outmaneuver the others and capture a larger share of the market.
I love that analogy. It captures the dynamic and often unpredictable nature of ecosystem competition. It raises questions about how companies respond to competitive threats, how they defend their turf, and how the balance of power shifts over time.
And let's not forget about the role of regulators.
Yeah.
They can have a huge impact on how these ecosystems evolve, especially when it comes to things like antitrust concerns and data privacy.
You're absolutely right. As ecosystems become more powerful and pervasive understanding, the role of regulation becomes increasingly important. How do we ensure that these platforms operate fairly and don't stifle competition or innovation? How do we balance the interests of the platform providers, the complementers, and the users?
Those are big questions. And I think this paper does a great job of highlighting just how much we still need to learn about the governance and regulation of ecosystems.
It certainly does. Now, shifting gears a bit, this paper also has some important implications for how we think about traditional strategy frameworks.
Oh, I'm intrigued. How does the ecosystem lens challenge our existing assumptions about strategy?
Well, take the resource-based view. RDV, for example. It's a classic framework that emphasizes leveraging the unique resources and capabilities that a company owns or controls to gain a competitive advantage.
Right. It's all about building moats around your business to protect yourself from competition. But in an ecosystem, many of those valuable resources might reside outside the boundaries of the firm.
Exactly. So how do we apply the RBV in a context where competitive advantage might depend on resources that a company doesn't directly control? How do we measure and manage resources that are distributed across a network of actors?
It's like trying to play a game of chess where the pieces are scattered across different boards. You can't just focus on your own pieces. You have to understand the entire board and anticipate the moves of other players.
That's a fantastic analogy. It really captures the strategic challenges of operating in an ecosystem, and it suggests that we need to rethink how we conceptualize and measure competitive advantage in an ecosystem world.
What about dynamic capabilities? Those are all about a company's ability to sense, seize, and reconfigure resources to maintain an edge in changing environments. Does the ecosystem lens challenge our thinking about dynamic capabilities as well?
Absolutely. If a company's success depends on the actions of other players in the ecosystem, what kinds of dynamic capabilities are needed to manage those relationships and adapt to the evolving dynamics? It's not just about adapting to market changes. It's about adapting to the changing needs and behaviors of your partners, your competitors, and the platform itself.
It seems like we need a whole new set of tools and frameworks to navigate this complex landscape.
That's why this paper is so groundbreaking. It's not just about understanding ecosystems, it's about rethinking the very foundations of strategic management in a world where these interconnected structures are becoming the norm. But there's still one crucial piece of the puzzle to explore: the specific strategies that companies can use to thrive within ecosystems. What are the strategic levers that hub firms can pull? How can non-hub firms position themselves for success? And how can policymakers create an environment that fosters innovation and competition in these dynamic systems?
That's right. We're moving from theory to practice. So let's start with the role of the hub firm. They often hold a lot of power in these ecosystems, shaping the rules of the game and influencing the overall direction of the system. What are some of the strategic levers they can pull?
One key decision that hub firms face is the level of openness they want to foster within their ecosystems. How modular do they want things to be? Remember that Lego analogy we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Hub firms need to decide how many of those Lego bricks they want to make available to others and how tightly they want to control the building process.
So a more open approach might attract a wider range of participants and foster more innovation. It's like saying, here the bricks go wild and build whatever you can imagine.
Exactly. But that also means less control for the hub firm. They might see amazing creations they never would have thought of, but they also risk losing some control over the direction of the ecosystem.
And a more closed approach might give the hub firm more power to shape the ecosystem and capture a larger share of the value. But it could also limit the overall growth and dynamism of the system. It's like saying, here are some bricks, but you could only build what I tell you to.
That's a great way to put it. It's that classic trade-off between control and openness that we see play out time and time again in the platform world. There's no one-size-fits-all answer. The optimal level of openness will depend on the specific goals of the hub firm, the nature of the industry, and the competitive landscape.
So beyond modularity, what other strategic decisions do hub firms need to grapple with?
Well, another crucial aspect is how they manage relationships with their complementers, those other players in the ecosystem who create products or services that enhance the value of the platform.
Because those relationships are the lifeblood of the ecosystem, right? They're what bring it to life.
Absolutely. The hub firm needs to create an environment where complementers can thrive and feel like they're getting a fair shake. It's not just about dictating terms. It's about fostering a sense of partnership and shared success.
So it's about creating a win-win situation where everyone has an incentive to contribute and make the ecosystem stronger. That sounds a lot easier said than done, though. How can hub firms actually achieve that?
It requires a lot of careful thought and attention to detail. For starters, the hub firm needs to establish clear governance rules that are fair and transparent. They need to develop pricing models that allow complementers to capture a reasonable share of the value they create. And they need to create strong communication channels to keep everyone informed and address any concerns that arise.
So it's almost like the hub firm is playing the role of a conductor, trying to orchestrate all these different players and instruments to create a harmonious symphony.
That's a wonderful analogy. But of course, even the best conductor can't control every note. There will always be some level of unpredictability and emergence in these complex systems. Things will inevitably go off script, and new challenges will arise. Hub firms need to be constantly learning, evolving, and adapting to stay ahead of the curve.
Okay, so we've talked about the hub firm's perspective. But what about the companies that aren't the hub? What strategies can they use to succeed within someone else's ecosystem?
Well, one option is multi-homing. That means participating in multiple ecosystems simultaneously, rather than putting all your eggs in one basket. We see this a lot with app developers who create apps for both iOS and Android, for example.
So it's about hedging your bets and reducing your dependence on any one platform. It also allows you to reach a wider audience, potentially tapping into different customer segments across various ecosystems.
Exactly. But as with everything, there are trade-offs. Multi-homing comes with costs. You're essentially spreading your resources and attention across multiple platforms, which can make it harder to focus and excel in any one area.
It also makes it harder to leverage platform-specific features or build deep integrations with any one ecosystem.
Yeah,
You're always trying to be a jack of all trades, which might make it harder to be a master of any.
that's a great point. So multi-homing is a strategic decision that depends on a company's specific goals, resources, and the nature of the ecosystems they're considering.
What other options do non-hub firms have?
Another key strategy is specialization. This involves finding a niche within the ecosystem and becoming the go-to provider for a specific product or service.
So instead of trying to be everything to everyone, you focus on being the best at one thing. It's like carving out a little piece of the ecosystem pie for yourself and becoming the undisputed expert in that domain.
Exactly. This allows you to differentiate yourself from the competition and build a loyal customer base. It can also give you more leverage in your relationships with the hub firm because you offer something unique and valuable that they can't easily replicate.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
But ultimately, non-hub firms still need to navigate their relationship with the hub firm, right? Because the hub firm still holds a lot of the cards.
that's true, but it's not a completely one-sided power dynamic. Non-hub firms can also exert influence and shape the ecosystem by collaborating with each other, advocating for their interests, and even threatening to defect to a competitor if their needs aren't met.
So it's all about understanding the power dynamics, navigating the complexities, and finding ways to create value for yourself and for the ecosystem as a whole. It requires a lot of strategic thinking and skillful relationship management.
And that's where policymakers have a crucial role to play as well. They're not just passive observers in this ecosystem game. They have the power to shape the rules of the road, influence the competitive landscape, and ensure that these powerful platforms operate in a way that benefits society as a whole.
It's about finding that delicate balance where innovation can flourish without stifling competition or creating undue harm.
Exactly. Policymakers need to be thoughtful about how they regulate these ecosystems, striking a balance between promoting competition and fostering innovation. They need to consider the potential impact of their decisions on consumers, businesses, and the overall economy.
Well, this deep dive has certainly given us a lot to think about. We've explored the intricate workings of ecosystems, from the fundamental concepts of modularity and complementarities to the strategic challenges and opportunities they present for companies and policymakers alike.
It's a fascinating and rapidly evolving field of study, and Jacobides, Cennamo, and Gawer's Towards a Theory of Ecosystems provides a valuable framework for understanding these complex systems and navigating the strategic landscape.
Thank you to all our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into the world of ecosystems. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. Until next time, happy platforming.
Thank you for listening to Talking About Platforms. In this special series on platform classics, we use AI to review and present published research, with intellectual property remaining with the original authors. Our goal is to make these insights accessible and encourage you to dive deeper into the original works. Stay tuned for more episodes and keep exploring the fascinating world of platforms.